Hello, I'm Father Jim, and this is the homily for the fifth Sunday of Lent. You know, in times of persecutions, Catholics used to gather for the Mass in the dead of night, few in number, here and there, out of sight, hoping not to get caught, hoping not to be seen. In such times, priests would break the law just to offer the Mass, and people who would attend those Masses risk their lives just to receive the Eucharist. I'm thinking about England in the time of St. Thomas More, or Mexico in the time of St. Miguel Pro. These Masses are a part of our history. Stories about faith practiced by a handful of people who sometimes would gather for the Eucharist around a crate for an altar. In concentration camps, POW camps, and caves lit by candlelight, and barns lit by moonlight, Catholics, hounded for their faith, huddled together like homeless people around a trash can fire on a winter night. The circumstances are certainly different today, but a lot of us today, without access to the Mass, feel a bit homeless. It's like in the book of Psalms, there's that beautiful verse that says, "My soul yearns and pines for the courts of the Lord." Well, we know that feeling. We long for God's house, but we can't go inside. We're like the thirsty deer in Psalm 42, who longs for the sound of running streams. But we have to settle for live stream Masses, and they're just not the same. Thank God we have them, but they're a far cry from what we really long for. You know, for us Catholics who are accustomed to the flowing currents of what we call the Sunday Mass, I'm thinking about the standing, the kneeling, the crawling babies, the elderly people with walkers, the sloshing rhythm of people singing together, the glint of light on a gold chalice, like morning light on the surface of a lake. You know, for us, the experience of just watching a live stream Mass is a little bit like a 14-year-old watching his classmates on a video. And they're swinging from ropes and plunging into creeks full of tadpoles and turtles and crawdads. And let's face it, it's just not the same. Grace dropped from, like rain from an eye cloud, just isn't the same as the feel of water on the fingers of our hands as we make the sign of the cross. Or it's a far cry from the weight of all eternity in that consecrated host that we hold in the palm of our hand. It's just not the same. But of course, compared to times of persecution, our present day sacrifices are really minimal. Nevertheless, let's go back to those times when those brave Catholics gathered in secret for the Mass to help us recognize the incredible power of the sacraments for which we long. Let's begin by focusing on distance. We know that the persecution of the faith took place in the distant past, and we know that it takes place today in distant, faraway places. And maybe that's telling us that we need to look at the reality of distance. That frustrating distance we experience today when the coronavirus restricts our movements, when it isolates us at home and keeps us 6 feet away from each other in public. Is there grace in that distance? Can we, like the thirsty deer in the book of Psalms, hear the sound of flowing water in the distance? Absolutely. Let me give you an example. Tomorrow, I'm going to invite 2 of our catechumens from my parish to join me for a private Mass. On the 5th Sunday of Lent, there's a special, indispensable blessing that's given for those who are preparing to be baptized. I'll unlock the door of the church. I'll place a bottle of sanitizer on a table nearby, and we'll all keep our distance. We'll keep a safe distance. But I assure you, there will be grace in that distance. During the liturgy of the Word, for instance, I'll invoke God's blessing on those catechumens, asking that the power of Christ's sacrament will conform them to Christ and enable them to triumph over the bitter fate of death. Across the distance of an all but empty church, I'll gaze into faces that are hungry for God, hungry for the touch of God. Across the distance of empty pews, I suspect I'm going to see a bit of a proud attitude, maybe even a defiant attitude, like I imagine on the faces of POWs who dare to gather for a secret mass in some tattered tent out of eyesight of the prison guards. Across the distance of a vacant room, I will proclaim an ancient blessing, and the words of that blessing will flow like a river. And in the currents of that river will be the promise of forgiveness of sin, the restoration of creation, the feeding of the hungry, the healing of the sick, the hope of a life without end. The same hope once offered in underground masses beneath the streets of Rome, amid the tombs of the martyrs. A promise of paradise once glimpsed from blood-soaked crosses on the outskirts of Nagasaki. The power of faith shouted loud in the cry, "Viva Cristo Rey!" as firing squads aimed rifles at priests who stretched out their arms to die for Christ who died for them. Friends, no government has ever been able to destroy the Catholic faith. And surely our faith cannot and will not buckle in the face of a virus that wears a tin crown called Corona. So these days of isolation, look in the distance. Look for grace in the distance. How blessed are we to be connected to Christ through his church. Across the distance of history, across the distance of space and time, like the deer that yearns for the sound of running streams in the distance, yearn for the Lord in the distance. He's calling us in a strong voice, as in today's gospel, "Lazarus, come out of that darkness." He's calling us. He's calling us across the distance.